The Republican primary for U.S. Senate, where polls show Senator John Cornyn is locked in a close battle with his two challengers, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Houston Congressman Wesley Hunt. Cornyn's campaign announced 30 current and former Republican elected leaders from DFW are endorsing his bid for a fifth term. Among the current office holders are Congressman Jake Ellzey of Midlothian and Congressman Craig Goldman of Fort Worth, State Representative Charlie Guerin of Fort Worth, and Fort Worth Mayor Matty Parker. There was a statewide poll of nearly 1,100 likely 2026 GOP primary voters by Hunt Research of Dallas, which is unaffiliated with any of the campaigns. It was conducted early last month, right after Congressman Hunt entered the race. It shows Paxton with 28%, Cornyn 24%, and Hunt at 19%. Other more recent polls show the race is even tighter than that. We spoke one-on-one with Senator Cornyn last week in Dallas, and I asked him why this race is so close and about the new endorsements he picked up from DFW leaders.
I take a certain amount of pride in helping build the Republican Party in our state, which is now a red state, solidly red state. And I think a lot of folks who maybe not from here, maybe they moved from somewhere else, don't really understand how we transformed Texas from essentially a Democratic stronghold to a Republican stronghold. And I think these elected officials, former and present, who are endorsing me is sort of a sign of a good housekeeping seal.
You've spoken with President Trump various times, obviously, but you've asked him for his endorsement. What's your pitch to him?
Well, I think, a couple of things. One is we've got 5 new congressional districts, and who's at the top of the ballot matters. If you have a strong candidate who's able to help lift voter turnout, I think we have a better chance of electing Republicans in each of those 5 new congressional districts. If we have somebody at the top of the ticket who's not lifting all boats because they're just basically going to skim by or lose in the general election, then that will have an effect down ballot. And the other is just the opportunity costs of spending a lot of money in a general election here in Texas when we have Senate races in North Carolina, in Georgia, in Michigan, and New Hampshire, where those resources could be used to increase the number of Republicans in the Senate. So those are a couple of the arguments I've made to the president, and as I've said before, I have a good working relationship with him. He'll make a decision on his own timetable, but he understands it clearly and he's following the race closely.
If you don't get his endorsement, is that going to be a big problem for you?
Well, if he doesn't endorse in the race, then that obviously that won't be a factor, but it would certainly help if he did. But if he decides not to and just stays out of the race, we're not slowing down, and I'm still optimistic that we'll win.
And let's talk about the polls, because the last independent poll that I've seen, University of Houston, Texas Southern poll, up until October 1st, showed Attorney General Ken Paxton at 34%, you at 33%, Congressman Wesley Hunt at 22%. This was before he got into the race. One of the newer polls that the Hunt campaign put out shows you at 26%, Paxton at 25%, Hunt at 24%, and those who were unsure at 26%. So why should you, being a 4-term incumbent, be this low in the polls? Why is this so tight?
Well, it's early, and
not that early.
I don't think most Texans, maybe other political junkies like you and me, we think about these things now a lot, but not most folks who are concerned about their kids going to school or their job or the government shutdown or other things. So I think as people begin to focus on it as we get closer to March 3rd, I think that'll certainly, the numbers will tighten up considerably. But I've run in a lot of campaigns, and I know Texas is such a big state, and it's hard to communicate and engage people all around a state as big as Texas, and it's very expensive. So I think we're on track. We have a roadmap to success, and we are hitting all of our landmarks along the way. And so the fact that we've been able to close the gap so dramatically, where the Attorney General's numbers have not gone up, but my numbers have gone up dramatically, I think the trend line is in our favor. So I'm very optimistic.
Does Wesley Hunt's entrance into this race hurt you?
I don't know. I don't think he can win. I think his own polls show that he wouldn't make a runoff. And so what could happen is it would force a runoff in May, and we're prepared for the duration. Obviously, I'd prefer to have the race decided in March.
What do you make of Congressman Hunt making your age an issue?
Well, I told him I work every day with a 79-year-old at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue who seems to be doing just fine too. So I think it's kind of a silly attempt to try to promote himself. You know, he's got his own challenges. He didn't show up for about 27% of the votes that have been held in the House, even votes that were important to President Trump and his agenda. So I don't think, as I said, I don't think he can win, but he can decide whether to run or not. But he's a young guy. I think he's got a future if he wants it, or he can end his political career by losing in this primary.
Affordability came up as an issue during this past election,
right,
and people are still very concerned about
right.
this. So how do you address this?
Well, I think we need to look at everything. And you're right. One of the reasons why we've seen things become unaffordable is because 40-year high inflation during the 4 years of the Biden administration. And while it's better now, we've still seen all of those costs very high, from the groceries to rent to mortgage. And of course, the Federal Reserve has tried to come to grips with the inflation by making money tight and keeping interest rates high. My hope is that they begin to provide some relief later in the year that will help bring interest rates down and make it easier for people to afford the necessities of life and buy a car and a home and the like.
Congressman Hunt campaigned in North Texas last week. He spoke before the Denton County Conservative Coalition in Louisville Monday night. And while at that event, we spoke with the congressman about the state of the race. The polls have shown, it seems like it's a dead heat between you and everybody else in this race, plus undecideds, right?
Yeah.
So my question to you is, what is the number one reason that Republican primary voters, if they don't like Ken Paxton, why should they vote for you over Senator Cornyn?
Well, look, I just really got in this race to give the primary voter a true conservative option. Look, at the end of the day, for the past few months, John Cornyn has spent almost $50 million in this race before the filing deadline, and that's actually a month away from now. $50 million before November the 1st, and still he is polling now in the mid-20s, which tells me that there's an appetite for someone like me to get into this race. And also keep in mind, you talk about the undecideds. How are there this many undecideds with a gentleman that's been in the Senate for 24 years and the current Attorney General from Texas? There's still a lot of people that still are looking for another candidate that can win the primary election. I was the first person in the country to endorse President Trump. I was a top surrogate for President Trump. I stuck with him from day one. I'm still with him, but also has the ability to win the general election against any generic Democrat. And right now, I'm outperforming both Ken and both John in the general election against any generic Democrat. And my name ID is at 73%. So we've been able to accomplish all of this in just 4 weeks.
So why should people vote for you? What are you bringing that the others don't?
Well, first of all, when I compare myself to Senator Cornyn, I am not a Bush-era establishment Republican. I am an America First patriot. I came in under the doctrine of President Trump and what he was able to do with this MAGA movement, especially here in Texas, and he won by 15.7 points, which means that the people here in Texas want somebody in the image of President Trump that's going to lead with that same strong America First type vigor about them. That clearly is not John Cornyn. And I'll also say this, the United States Senate is not a retirement community. John Cornyn has been around for 24 years. It's time to retire. It's time for the next level of leadership, the next era of leadership to step into the fray and lead us into the future. Look, our Secretary of State's in his early 50s. Our Secretary of War is 45 years old. Our Vice President is 41 years old. Now, I always joke and I always say President Trump is surrounding himself with these young people because we're the only ones that can even kind of keep up with them because he's a different kind of person. But I think he also realizes the need for young leadership now to step into the fray because when President Trump is gone in 2 years, who's going to carry on the mantle and who's going to carry on the banner? And it's not John Cornyn.
But Senator Cornyn was asked about your comments, and he said, I work very closely with 79-year-old President Trump.
Yeah, so if John Cornyn is going to compare himself to the vigor of President Trump, I find that to be absolutely hilarious. I'm a person that campaigned with President Trump, and I did one swing with him where I met him in Chicago. We flew from Chicago to Colorado, Colorado to California, California back to Las Vegas, all in one day, him giving speeches the entire time. And again, I don't know how I was able to keep up with him. John Cornyn is not Donald Trump.
Last question. Affordability seems to be an issue that people had in the election, and I'm wondering, how do you solve people's concerns as far as pricing? Obviously, inflation is down from 2022, record inflation over 9%, but it's still at 3%, and people are still unhappy with prices at grocery stores, et cetera.
Yes.
So how do you ease their concerns? What plan do you have?
Inflation is down. We have to let the cake bake. We have to let President Trump continue to do for the economy like he did the first time he ran. Take the brakes off, get rid of all the regulations, get rid of all the restrictions, allow inflation to continue to come down, and then eventually in Q1 and Q2 of next year is when you're going to see it really get good for the average everyday American. This is why President Trump worked so quickly when he first got into office. If you recall how rapid he was moving with the tariffs and changing the things and changing the ills of the previous 4 years, that's because by the time we got to the midterms, we were already going to be in good shape. And if you would have waited, it would have taken too long. So again, I think the process is working. We have to undo 4 years of a disaster in order for us to get to a good place before the midterms. You got to trust the process.
Attorney General Ken Paxton spoke before the chapter of Turning Point USA, founded by Charlie Kirk, at the University of North Texas in Denton last Monday evening. We have requested an interview with Paxton 8 times since he entered the race 7 months ago and still haven't received one, and we will keep asking. We spoke with Ross Hunt of Hunt Research, a Republican polling and data firm in Dallas, about this primary battle. He is not tied to any of the candidates in this race.
It's a really exciting race. We have a U.S. Senate race that's in a dead heat right now, and it's something that many didn't anticipate at the beginning of the year. I think at the beginning of the year, in the polling that I ran on my own in January of 2025, and many others ran, it looked like Senator Cornyn was in a very bad position, and there was even speculation that he might not choose to run again. And Attorney General Paxton was viewed as a very formidable opponent. Now, I think over the course of the 6 months following that, through June and up through even October, the senator proved that he could spend money through his campaign and his PAC, and he succeeded in repairing his image. And now he sat in a very good position relative to Paxton when Wesley Hunt announced and entered the race. And now we have Hunt rapidly rising after Cornyn has risen back up to Paxton, and so we have the three of them almost in a dead heat at this point.
How significant is that? And the fact that Cornyn was able to bounce back. A, did that surprise you? And B, is it a big deal?
It did surprise me, and I think it is very significant. I think I never wrote the senator off, but I think like many others, I was pessimistic about his ability to come back. You know, I've worked on a lot of campaigns, and I worked for a lot of incumbents and against a lot of incumbents, and in many of those cases, incumbent elected officials damage themselves so much in the eyes of the electorate, or they are viewed as so stale. But Cornyn has proven that's not the case with him. He was able to spend a lot of money, and it had a positive effect and allowed him to climb back. And so that's very significant. It means that he's still very much in the hunt, and that even if he dips back down, he can advertise, he can tell his story, and he can move back up. The race is interesting in this regard too, in that Paxton has not been releasing his polling and has not been doing as much advertising. He's campaigning actually a lot more like an incumbent, even though he's the challenger, because he thinks he has a strong position as someone who's trying to situate himself far to the right. And so he is waiting. The other two don't have the luxury to wait. Cornyn because he has to repair his image, and Hunt because he needs to rise.